2, 1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, side government cannot have their cake and eat it too. We think that regardless of this being a first motion, having children, building genuine relationships, and really being able to connect with them and seeing them grow into the beautiful people they're eventually going to become is a huge responsibility. And we think that we don't want a particular world where this unique opportunity and responsibility is diluted by many people in the community in the guise of this being effective for them because people are busy or people have other things to pay for. Before I move on to my rebuttal, a few key points of framing we think are crucial for this round. The first is, we agree, this is a comparison of worlds to be able to see where children are better off in terms of being able to form their own unique identities and actualize themselves, and also be able to be successful and set up for success in the future. The second is, our counterfactual is very clear. In status quo, we support that. We rather have the concept and sense of a nuclear family with very clear duties and responsibilities in order to really have a clearer check and balance system which really establishes accountability. We question the lens of accountability on side government because the point in which everybody is able to be part of it, that's when no one is actually truly responsible, whether in terms of taking credit when things go well or things being poor if something bad happens. Now they might tell us, well, the whole community is now going to be able to be responsible and that's better. But we question the pragmatism of that in terms of who's really going to be able to discipline the child, who's really going to be able to teach them, who's going to really be able to guide them, who can that child attribute a sense of identity to. The third is, we think that in status quo, it's not perfect, but at least it's easier to opt out of a nuclear individual family as opposed to having to opt out of an entire community. Like what the previous speaker said, if the sense of identity and community is so strong, that is the point in which people are less likely to be able to challenge those things because they fear stigma, they fear scrutiny. And just like what they mentioned about a gender identity and norms, if you are, by virtue of the birth lottery, born into a particular conservative community, but you identify as a sexual minority, for instance, or a racial minority, how can you opt out of that system? It becomes significantly harder. You put more barriers to be able to do it. What did the previous speaker tell us, right? Firstly, they talked about the quality of life and there's less likelihood to be abused. We think that on their side, when it now becomes the whole community indoctrinating them and being able to help them, they're more likely to be able to feel judged and have a fear of getting cancelled. For instance, if their biological parent, for instance, the one who hurt them, is a tribal leader or who's someone who has clout in a particular community because they're important to the state or they're a politician, that is the point in which it becomes so much harder to go against them when they have a sphere of influence that actually control the entire community. The second is, even if that's not particularly the case, who is actually going to be able to be responsible to help you? Because at most, people are going to be empathetic, they're going to be able to do it, but we think that specifically in terms of who's going to be able to do it, there creates this illusion of effectiveness, wherein if you think that everybody is going to be able to have a role, that's the point at which no one's going to do it. That's why oftentimes, ladies and gentlemen, when we see accidents, no one actually calls 911 because everybody just assumes, oh, someone else is going to do it, therefore I'm not going to do it, and we're not willing to go through that risk. The third is, there are other many alternatives to being able to get help. We agree with the POI that the previous speaker said. We think you have agents of the state, you have psychologists and psychiatrists, you have social welfare departments. There are other alternatives to directly be able to report a particular instance of abuse as opposed to relying on the multiple layers of bureaucracy. It's more likely to happen when more people are involved. The second thing is on this idea of diversity of worldview. We think that the problem here is that the point in which children are indoctrinated at a very young age about particular ideologies is the point in which they're more likely to feel analysis paralysis at worst if they're exposed to a multitude of ideas that actually contribute to cognitive dissonance that might lead them not being able to make a decision, or if the society is somewhat monolithic or rather largely conservative or liberal, they're subject, ladies and gentlemen, to groupthink, where a majority of people from that particular community are going to have a strong stance that reflects the community, and it becomes harder to challenge that. Why is having a biological parent who you're closely related to better? Because that's where better discourse can actually happen, even if you guys actually disagree with each other. And we think that's better on our side. The next thing they told us is that, oh, it's just easier for parents to be able to raise more children. We tell you true, but that also leads to people having children willy-nilly because they can wash their hands clean of any form of responsibility and rely on the community, burden people and burden the state to being able to do it. That leads to people just having many kids and essentially burdening the entire system and community and state even if they consent to it. Lastly, on this idea of gender norms, we think that the point in which they're exposed, like I mentioned earlier, to a multitude of ideologies at a young age, or a monolithic one, they're then able to experience things like groupthink and succumb to a particular gender ideology, or analysis paralysis at a very young age, which actually harms their ability to choose their identity as opposed to having a central figure of that parent. What have I told you from my speech? Because largely my rebuttal were also constructive. I told you why through a nuclear family, you can best create a unique identity, and why raising children communally sets them up for more confusion and likelihood of failure in the long run. It ultimately robs parents the responsibility and opportunity to actually grow and have that unique relationship between parent and child, and it robs the child the opportunity and capacity to be able to engage in difficult discussion at a point in which that's necessary, not just for their growth, but also the parents' growth. And we think that these difficult and controversial and oftentimes painful conversations are really what lead to growth. For all of these reasons, we're very proud to open First Flash. Thank you.